football player that is not contributing well and still is not doing well overall, and I know he didn't play much, is that C.J. Spillers. If I had to rate the Saints running backs in terms of contribution and play versus the last 3 to 4 games at the end of the regular season in 2015, and with his first preseason game and training camp and OTs, it would be Mark Ingram, number 1. Number 2 would be, for me, Marcus Murphy. Number 3 would be Tavares Cadet. Number 4, Daniel Lesko. And number 5 would be C.J. Spillers. And because of the signing and the salary, you're not going to cut C.J. Spillers. But now that puts Tavares Cadet and probably Hightower, the 2 in jeopardy, because Lesko is a great contributor and was the leading tackler with special teams. So you can't get rid. He's also able to play gunner, and he's able to be a running back. And with the situation where the Saints running backs every year get hurt, this is going to be a very interesting race to see who makes the team and who doesn't in terms of that. They didn't get a lot of yardage, only 78 yards I think they had in total rushing. So that's a whole nother story when we get to the offensive line. So in terms of my grade for the running backs, in terms of their contribution, Lesko, Murphy, Ingram, you can't give them no worse than, I'd have to give them, because they didn't get a lot of yardage running, I'd have to drop it down to a solid D. But in terms of keeping the team in the game, with all they contributed, Ingram and even the new fullback Kuhn and all of them, overall, I'm very pleased with what we have. We've got to fix our line. So I gave them an A for effort, overall production and contributions. I mean, because they had 78 yards of rushing, I had to drop their grade from an A- to a B. Your thoughts on the running backs and the situation at hand, DB?
I think the most concerning part is not the amount of yards that they ran for, but the fact that they only ran for 78 yards on 30 touches, which is an average of somewhere around 2.6 yards per carry. Now, like you said, Professor, I'm not sure if that solely lies on the running backs, if it's more of the offensive line, if it's a scheme thing where there's both units are still trying to figure it out, but the 2.6 yards per carry is just not going to get it done. Believe it or not, the player with the highest average in yards per carry in this game was Tavares Cadet, the player that you think, and I actually think as well, is going to be the odd man out on this core group of running backs. And that's going to be a really interesting thing. Who's the odd man out? Do the Saints keep 5 running backs? They keep 4 running backs? Because you brought up a good point. Lesko can play anywhere special teams-wise. Marcus Murphy has shown his ability in the return game, and if you really watch that game all the way through, one player that I did not see return the ball but one time was Tommy Lee Lewis, a player who I thought we'd see a lot more, which tells me one of two things. Either Marcus Murphy is really proving himself in OTAs, or they're going to hold off on showing Tommy Lee Lewis time until later on into the preseason. I think Murphy really impressed. 7 carries, 22 yards on the game. He also had 3 catches for 18 yards, and obviously the big 48-yard punt return in which he did bobble, but was able to pick it up and get some good yardage and give Garrett Grayson a short field to work with in that game. I think Ingram gave you what you expect out of Mark Ingram. It might not be a ton of yards, but it's hard running. The 2 touchdowns, obviously. Hightower only had 4 touches, 2 yards. Spiller didn't have a big day. I think Spiller was only out there for less than 10 snaps. Not a productive day for CJ either. Lesko really impressed me a little bit. He had a couple spin moves there to gain some extra yards. Really showed kind of what we've heard about in camp so far. And Cadet had 21 total yards. Not an awful day out of Cadet, but I still think he's the odd guy out. If I look at this first preseason game, I'm going to give the team a B- rating just because they weren't able to rack up yards on all those carries, and the average was really low. But I like the core group, and I think if Ingram can be your number one guy and stay healthy throughout the season. And Hightower can play the role that Kyrie Robinson played a little bit the last few years and be the back that gives Ingram a breather and is still able to be productive. And then whether it's Spiller, Lasco, Cadet, or Murphy who really gets that Reggie Bush, Darren Sproles type of role at running back, I think the Saints are going to be fine at back. I think there's a lot of positives to take away from the game.
Yeah, so we're going to keep our eyes on the running backs and how the evolution of that situation evolves as to who makes this team. I think that particular department or unit will go down to the last cut before the regular season starts. So keep an eye on. And segue into, since you brought up my man Tommy Lee Lewis, I want to go to the wide receivers before I ended it with the offensive line. The wide receivers, I think this is just me. Tommy Lee Lewis has proven right now he's the number 4 wide receiver. He has surpassed Brandon Coleman, and I feel also Jared Dangerfield has surpassed Brandon Coleman. I think Jared Dangerfield, if the Saints keep 5 wide receivers, he needs to be on the team, or you give him a chance to put him on a practice squad. But right now, number 1 is Brandon Cooks. And here's my surprise. I think the other starting wide receiver needs to be Michael Thomas, and Willie Snead play the slot. And I think your number 4, and he's a playmaker, I think is Tommy Lee Lewis. He's had a great training camp. He's had great OTAs. I think the little man, 5'7", 170. I'm just 2 inches taller than him, and I weigh the same thing. I'm 5 feet, 8.5, 5 feet 9, 170. And so little things, small packages, big things do come in them. I can contest to that, you know. And so I think, for me, this is just me, and I said this to Kyle or Frank, if Coach Sean Payton, and I see another great game from Marcus Murphy, Daniel Lesko, and Tommy Lee Lewis, and he cuts any one of these guys, then I question this man's ability to evaluate talent. Something is wrong with the Saints. Because this little man has surpassed. He had 81 total contribution yards. You can also put him back there in the kicking game, and there is something there with that young man and that little man, and that 20-yard catch he made was absolutely phenomenal. And so I don't know what the Saints are going to do. Akeem Nicks did not work out. I don't know if they're thinking about looking at Roddy White or bringing Marcus Colston back in or Lance Moore or anything like that. I think they need to stick with Tommy Lee Lewis, play him extensively in week 2, and see what he can do as a wide receiver, giving him a lot of snap counts. I think Brandon Coleman is now on the bubble. This project with Brandon Coleman, is beginning to wear itself out. Brandon Coleman needs to really step up the next 2 preseason games. And if he does not, I think you're going to have to make a decision. And you're going to have to go with, Cooks, Snead, Thomas. The new name will be Lewis and Jared Dangerfield. Because Brandon Coleman has not shown anything. In terms of Michael Thomas, everything that we've heard and read about him, we saw it in those 2 spectacular catches he made. 2 of his 4 catches he made in the game. He was the top receiver in the game, 4 receptions for 67 yards. And so Michael Thomas is now pushing for a starting job. And I've always stated that the Saints have to put the best 53 on the field, regardless of age. You have to put the best 53 out there. Not much from the tight ends. I don't know what's still going on with Josh Hill. Not much. They weren't out there long enough. But even, Kobe and the starters were gone quickly, but I didn't see much from the tight ends at all. Those behind Kobe Senior, Josh Hill and the gentleman from Southern. I can't think of his name right now. So overall, with the wide receivers, what I got to see from them, Brandon Cooks, of course, was BC, and he did what he normally does. Michael Thomas, Willie Snead had a big catch. So wide receivers, I think we're solid there. I like if we can get Tommy Lee Lewis into the game and what he's able to do in matchups and stuff, and if we can with our 3. So I'm feeling really good about our wideouts in terms of them. The thing that's going to be important for Thomas and Lewis is that, more practice with Drew because they're rookies and he's got to get comfortable. If we notice, last year it took him a while, not long, but he got real comfortable with Snead. So it won't take Drew long to get comfortable with Lewis and Thomas. Now, if Brandon Coleman can come on and really step up these next two preseason games, then he can be the fifth wide receiver, and then we can put Jared Dangerfield on the practice squad because he has potential too. That Dangerfield from Western Kentucky, I followed and looked at and listened to his Western Kentucky commentaries. Jared Dangerfield is another Willie Snead type receiver, so I don't want to see the Saints lose him. Practice squad, I will keep him around. So my feelings for the wide receivers and my grade for the wide receivers would be, because of Lewis's play and Michael Thomas' play and Cook's, I have to give them a solid A+ for what I saw from the wide receivers in the game on yesterday. Your thoughts, BB?
Let's go ahead and just start with Michael Thomas living up to his Twitter handle, can't guard Mike. And it seemed like all night long he couldn't be guarded. He made a spectacular catch. The second one, to be exact, where he caught the ball, pass interference on the defensive back, still manages to make that catch. Michael Thomas is the real deal. We've heard about it all camp, and I tweeted out before the game that he was my player to watch. I really wanted to see if he is everything that they have said from camp that he is. Now, obviously, with me being all the way out on the East Coast, I haven't been to any training camp at all. I haven't seen him firsthand. But to watch that preseason game and really see some of the fundamentals that this kid is really good at in terms of footwork. His hands are so quick, able to adjust and make crazy catches on the sidelines. Michael Thomas is the real deal. I'm really excited to see what this kid can do paired up with Cooks and with Willie Snead. Another quiet game from Brandon Coleman. Professor touched on that a little bit. Larry Holder actually touched on it a little bit as well, saying, has anybody seen Brandon Coleman? He hasn't been present in camp either, not in a physical way, like he hasn't been there, but more of he hasn't been making plays. He hasn't been one of those noticeable guys in training camp so far. So I said it the last time we were on the air. I think that Coleman is a bubble guy. I think that it's going to be a big question mark if he can really show us who he's supposed to be, this great kid from Rutgers with all this potential, great 4.5, 40 times speed, huge height. We just haven't seen it. Tommy Lee Lewis had a good game, 3 catches, 38 yards. A really good catch, like Professor said, over the middle from Luke McCown. He's got the ability in the return game. And here's the great thing, because he's 5'7", you're able to move him around if you want to. He had a 2-point conversion jet sweep. Imagine if Tommy Lee Lewis can line up in the slot, but also line up in the backfield. He might be one of those versatile players that Sean Payton's able to use. Cooks only had the 1 catch for 37 yards. Snead had a quiet day, 1 catch for 22, or he reversed field. It was a really pretty play. But overall, the receivers played well. I'm not going to give them the A+. I'll give them an A- in terms of, as a group, we're seeing the type of competition this wide receiver core is going to be able to give us, and it's going to be hard. It's going to be a really hard decision to see who stays on the team and who leaves.
I think the Saints may, depending on how games 2 and 3 go, I still would not. What are you talking, Kyle? We can hear you, Kyle.